Hi, Eva, and welcome back to AVVA Talks.
Hi, Alina. Nice to see you.
Now we are on our first step towards a new endeavor that we want to develop and to unfold to all those listening to us. And that's a chapter that I personally had a lot of challenges with. And from that experience, maybe it would be interesting to share also and to see your perspective on these things as a specialist, as a therapist, as a trainer, as a woman living in these times, and how our filters and how our attitudes and the way we build and develop are influencing the choices that we make in life, and how aware are we of the choices that we are exposed to or that are presented to us. As some of your mentors, Virginia Satir, said that awareness leads to choice. And I strongly relate to that vision and to that message. The more aware we are, the more able we are to see and to sense first the choices that are presented to us, and then to be able to make our own choices and commit to them throughout our lives. Because maybe some of the greatest reasons people are unhappy these days is that because they have no choices, or at least they seem to believe that they have no choices. And as we know, our beliefs are actually our personal truths. If somebody believes that is stuck in a cubicle, like the ones in the background, in my background, is the reality that they have in front of their eyes, it's kind of difficult to get out of that cubicle, or to maybe look at the window and see the sky that is behind that window.
Yeah. Well, Alina, I love that you are introducing the general theme of choice, and also the challenge about actually noticing in certain situation that I may have a choice, or I can develop to bring to my attention that there is choice. As you said, the quote from Virginia is one of my favorite quotes. I think I bore my students with the quote. There's probably not a single day passing by when I would not say awareness leads to choice. Virginia Satir said that. But I do find it very deep, very profound. Another way I like to sometimes say, the way I like to say it in my own words is, I do not know what I do not know about myself. And I only know what I know. Sounds very shallow, but on an experiential level, there's a lot of depth to that. Which means the more I get to know about myself, meaning, and I have my filters behind me, in my background here, the more I get to know about the filters that are shaping my reality, that are actually are introducing a way of how I perceive the world. And that is shaping my focus of attention, and my focus of how I experience myself and the world has dramatic impact on how much I feel, is there a choice or is there no choice? And actually, Virginia Satir always liked to kind of carve out in order to help maybe a family system, or somebody who was in therapy, if they felt like there's just one choice, to help them to find ways of unpacking things so that they may see a second possibility or even a third possibility. As soon as I find I can see it this way, I can see it a second perspective, and I can have a third perspective on it too. As soon as the number 3 appears, we have a subjective experience of choice and freedom. And that usually needs a certain unpacking of the reality and how I am seeing things in a different light. It needs practice.
Yeah, it definitely needs practice, and it's something that is constantly manifesting in a person's life. And a lot of times what I have noticed is really difficult and really challenging to go through the process completely on your own. And the help of other people is in some moments essential.
Yeah.
Like maybe participating in a workshop, or reading a book, or listening to an audio of some sort, or interacting with a mentor, or a coach, or a therapist, somebody that can facilitate these other perspectives, these second, third, or maybe more perspectives on the same thing, on the same situation. And this is one of the intentions that we have for these conversations that we are opening now in this space, to take topics that are really connected with our times and with our challenges that we face, and put them in a way, present them in a way that can allow for those listening to maybe develop their own perspectives about things, and then choose what perspective they want to commit to and what they want to develop further.
Yeah.
And as we were speaking earlier before the recording about how Virginia Satir developed a model that is really powerful in developing this kind of interactions and this kind of developments in a person. Maybe we can talk about that, and you can share some more about this model.
Yeah, I love that. In Virginia Satir actually wrote down her method, her model that then became the Satir model, and what we developed in the next generation, the Generative Systemic Satir Model, as it also incorporates somatic movement integration practices as well as generative change work. But the Satir model originally was actually written down very late. Virginia has done a lot of clinical research, a lot of practical work, and really researching thousands of families and noticing through observation and working with them how she could help them to move towards wholeness. It's a absolutely non-pathology oriented model, even though she was a therapist by training, a family therapist that had done groundbreaking work in order to help families to create towards growth. And out of those observations, she was making the distinction between I want to say like early generation therapy work being done kind of more in a hierarchical model. Meaning the hierarchical model is one that says, here's an expert, the expert knows exactly the script, what's best, and here's a patient that seeks help. So there is a hierarchy in it, who knows best and who needs, and then kind of making an analysis and a prescription, what's wrong, what needs to be done, and who has exactly the right idea to do that. And we do find that quite a lot, the hierarchical idea, not just in therapy, but also here's the expert that knows everything about cars. So I'm going to listen to this expert. Here's the expert about the virus, and I'm listening and taking in all of that. So there's here's the parent that knows best for the children. Children are listening to the parents because they know exactly how things are done. So it's you can put many roles to different people, but the idea is there's a hierarchical top-down idea system. Virginia Satir, as opposed to the classic knowing hierarchical model introduced based on existentialist philosophy, and also based on the humanistic psychology movement, the idea of what she called the seed model or the growth-oriented model. And usually when I begin classes, I like to introduce the comparison between the two models and how they play out in 4 different factors. I can look at 4 different areas in order to understand, are we looking more at a hierarchical model, or are we looking more at a seed or a growth-oriented model, to find the differences. And when I teach it, I'm not saying that's bad and the other one is good. What I'm saying is be clear about the differences, and then find also ways of how we can bridge and connect the 2 models with each other, because we got to be realistic. The world today, as much as I like it to be different, as much as I find we are called out in the world to change the how we perceive the world, today it's designed in cubicles. Today it's designed in a hierarchical system in most of the places. Clinics, organizations, businesses, institutes, politics, whatever area, educational system, whatever area that's systemized, I look at is designed by a hierarchical model, and that comes with certain ingredients. And I promote, as I represent the Satya model, that we're moving in terms of our work towards a seed model, a growth-oriented model. But I'm also a realist, and I know we have to find a way how to honor the rules of the hierarchical system without confusing our own selves in them. And then we can talk about the ingredients of that too.
Yeah, so it's different from the either or approach. We don't have to choose between those two 100%, but to see what fits and in what context and what purpose does it serve, and what benefits and what needs to be paid as the price for implementing a certain approach, and
Exactly.
how we can develop something that is more useful and more applied for the times that we are living and for the times to come, because this in a lot of places this hierarchical system has proven very beneficial for some time, and yet there are a lot of sectors, as you mentioned, where it tends to wear out, and it tends to limit the further development of the society and of people. Probably in education, this is the most visible way of how things are going on, and how this hierarchy actually stops children from developing their inner traits and inner abilities, and instead of helping them flower and grow, they rather make them think that they need to be in a certain way, in a certain artificial way, in order to fit in, whether it is a cubicle or whether it is something else.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this replicates something that was previously created and was beneficial maybe for a period of time, but now we are in a different time in history, and we are in a face of something that was probably never presented to us.
Yeah. You know, I have to admit, I'm feeling extremely heartbroken these days, and seeing and experiencing all the terrible harm that gets done by hierarchical systems and by division into either or, good, bad, right, wrong, this, that. Whenever there's one to the other, there is an implicit better than, not good enough, and that division is creating so much misuse of power, and so many dehumanizing activities that I'm like so hardened by sitting in the face and being in the middle of I want to say constructed dehumanizing system, and having people finding their way and being human in a not human system. And it's almost like an impossible task. I mean, when we look at a hierarchical system, you can look at 4 different elements, or in comparison of both systems, we can look at 4 elements. One is, how do we define a person? In a hierarchical system, definition of a person is usually you fit in or you don't fit in. It has to be, and then the measures are too much or not good enough. We put people in a box, we put them in a set rigid frame and say, here's the criteria, you fit in that frame or you don't fit in that frame. And pretty vividly, Virginia Satir used to make the metaphor of the medieval torture bed, where you would put people on the torture bed. If they didn't fit, then you chopped off the feet or whatever body part was hanging over, chopping it off, and that would give the measure. So too bad, the outcome is the patient is dead, but the operation was successful. That's a very brutal and vivid image, but the idea is really on a psychological, on an emotional, on a mental level. We're putting people into these, you got to fit into this box. If you're fitting in, great. If you're not fitting in, then you're not good enough, or you may be too much. And that's the idea of defining a person. Here's the seed model. The seed model, coming informed by the existential idea and the humanistic psychology, is saying, you are a miracle of life. You're a manifestation of the same universal energy that is energy all around us. Meaning, it's the energy of the ocean, is the energy of the sky, is the energy of the mountain, is the energy of the sun. And when you and the animals and the plants and everything. And if you happen to come in a shape of a body, then you are embodied manifestation of the same universal energy that we're all interconnected with. And then that comes in its total uniqueness, like a fingerprint. There's only one fingerprint, and that's unique to you. So is your spirit, so is your way of moving, so is your shape of your body, so is your hair color, so is your eye color, so is your any pigments, any language and attributes. There's a uniqueness in this miracle that you are, and life never makes any mistakes. So life itself is saying, I love you so much. You're the greatest being in this particular shape. And that's the definition of a person in the seed model. Very different to fit yourself in a box. If you're fitting in, great. We give you praise. If you don't fit in, we make you wrong.
Yeah.
And then there are whatever actions to it.
Yeah. And it's kind of interesting how this hierarchical model continues and exists and goes on and on. And it's actually kept alive by paradox, as I see it, by the people that are inside the system, because the system cannot live without the people that are keeping it alive. And it's like whoever gets involved, and we are part of that system, and we by our actions are keeping the system going forward in with the same rules as before. And if we are allowed to be transformed in such ways as to fit the box, then we replicate the box to the other generations, and we propagate the structure by our simple presence within the system and the full acceptance of that. So it's a paradox that we leave some parts of ourselves out in the process of getting into the system, and then keeping the system going.
Yeah, I love how you describe it, right? It's like an in itself mad making system. In order to fit that box, I have to leave a part of myself out so that I measure up with that. And it's like, what's wrong in that picture? Why would I try to fit myself in the first place into something that's too small as a box anyways? It's
and then in the process there is a great risk, and that is the risk that thinking that the system as it is organized and I'm part of it, it's the only thing there is, and it's the only possibility there is for things to happen, because I'm in it and this is what I see around me. And maybe one of the key roles of facilitators and of people that are somehow in the service of working with other people, and maybe even those working in educational system or in teams in companies, have this ability of being inside a given cubicle, a given pattern, and yet interacting with people in such a way that the people are fully heard and seen and feel whole within themselves and within the team. So it's not like, okay, we need to tear up the whole system. It's like you said earlier, how we can work within these systems to create something more than that.
Totally. Well, one of the thought experiments I invite usually, for example, a client to do when they say, "Oh, I work in this hierarchical system, maybe in the city of Cologne, in like a very rigid system, but I want to find a way that I can bring my uniqueness, and I don't want to leave everything behind." What I usually invite people to do is, please be very clear about the restrictions that the frame is setting to you. So I become very attentive to what are the restrictions that are part of the organization. You know, what is something that you can directly influence for yourself? Where are the limits? What are the rules? You know, what is the frame that is honestly given to you? And please try to not waste your energy too much onto the frames that you're not directly being able to change. Maybe you can make some advices, maybe you can make some proposals in order to challenge the frame, but be clear if there's a direct influence, because otherwise you put yourself in the helplessness of that rigid frame. But there is an open space within the frame that you have possibilities to move in. So I invite people to be very clear. What is the restriction that you have to honor because they're fixated right now and you're not the person in charge and in power to be able to change them? So what we like to talk about is second best solutions, because usually the best solution that my client will have is change the frame, change the system. But that may not be directly accessible, enabled, because it needs other people in it to make that happen. And then I am not really in the power of my choice, because it's not what I can do directly. And so I would say, is there a possibility that the best choice that you have, which maybe implies somebody needs to change the frame and that's outside of your power, that we can give that some grieving space? Because if I need to let go of an idea, I need to be willing to be okay to grieve, to be sad, because my best choice is not available. Yet the good news is, if I know exactly the framing within I have given a space, then I could think about what's the best second choice that is within my power, that is within my choice, that's within my ability of bringing my fullness of my uniqueness as a person also in, and not carrying on the story I have to leave myself at home in order to be able to work in that system. Because when I do that division inside of myself, that is what's creating a burnout. I will burn myself out because I have to leave out possibly an essential part of myself. And so I'm trying to support somebody to negotiate best solution, let it go, grieve what needs to be grieved, and find the power and choice within the second best solution that is giving you a frame of possibility. If you say, I have no choice in leaving the system, I'm part of the system, okay? Because leaving is always a choice as well. So the being part of the system is a choice in itself, because I could also leave it, right? But the other side is to find a way how to change within the given frame, and maybe kind of like flirting with the idea. Maybe if I'm just repetitively inviting people to think about, does that frame still make sense, or are we maybe at the time to update it? Is it still making sense? The more I repeat an invitation to double check if the system, if the frame is still right, maybe at some point, surprisingly, you may even be noticing I could even change the frame. I have a client who was able to do that in a seemingly rigid hierarchical system where we thought it's impossible. So we talked about the restriction, but at some point in her position, she was actually able to expand the boundaries and even change the frame itself quite a little bit. So then you have the double windows behind you and not the little windows or something like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting how maybe at some point we think there is no choice. We have no choice but to do this specific thing. Yeah. And yet we go on doing over and over and over unconscious choices we are not aware of. So when I first heard that quote of Virginia Satir, that awareness leads to choice, I could not help myself but to think of all the unconscious choices that we make every day and we are not aware of.
Yeah.
From I don't know what we buy from the supermarket, to what channel do we watch on TV, to where we go on vacation, to how we speak to our colleagues, to how often we call our parents. These are all choices that we make. Every action, if we reduce to the smallest thing, can be seen as a choice, but is a choice made consciously or unconsciously, depending on how we relate to that choice.
Totally. I mean, frankly, Virginia Satir would sometimes, she had a family sometimes with court orders, you know, when there was domestic violence cases, and from the court that she would get orders into our office. And so one of the questions was actually about choice. So what made you come here, and what are your hopes, and what do you want to get out of this, our working together, like focusing on the goal and what they're hoping to get. And a lot of times people would say, we didn't have any choice. We got a court order, we had to come. And then she would very creatively point out, well, I hear you have a choice. You could come to me, which you chose to do, or you could go in prison. And you chose to be here. So I wonder, now that you're here, what do you want to do with that choice that you just took? And so there is, even in those ideas, when I get sent and I feel that's the only direction I have. No, I could choose the prison or the punishment, or I could choose to be here for now. I found that actually a really poignant, really interesting way of framing or reframing this idea in those particular cases. Then there's also a really important piece when we think about the comparison of the hierarchical model coming from the therapy traditional perspective, and then what she proposes as the seed or growth model. A really important element that ties right to that is the definition of a relationship. And so from the person, one sees here's a person that has to fit in, and here we see the uniqueness and honoring the uniqueness of a person, and they're all same in value. Then on the relationship level, in the hierarchical system, we say congruently there, one is up, one is down. One can be talked over. So there's a dominance and submission. There's a power relationship in the sense of using power for certain interest. So, I mean, to come back to that question, does it make sense to hold on to certain systems? Yes, because some people are benefiting. And depending on where you are in the relationship gap, it makes sense that I get something out of it. So it is beneficial for some people to hold on to certain systems because I'm getting my share. Same true though also in the helping field. And I heard Virginia Satir pointing out that when we are in the helping field and people are seeking for our support, it's our responsibility that we're not taking advantage out of the power relationship that we're in because somebody has a need, somebody's seeking help, and I'm responsible not to take advantage of that. In the hierarchical system, we have one up, one down. The up can talk over the other one, giving advice, patting them on the head, could be in a nice way, could be in a very dominant, even violent way. But it's in the Satir categories, when we talk about stress copings, she would make the comparison between the blamer, so the one that's up and say, I blame you, it's your fault, you got to do it a certain way. Then the submissive part would be more the placator. I'm at the mercy of somebody else. I'm the victim here. It's all my guilt, and I have to take I have to take it on me. Then people who are shutting down and not feeling anything are called the super reasonable, the computer. I'm blocking from my emotions. I don't feel anything. I fit in the cubicle. In fact, I've become a robot that is just, doing things as they're told me to. Another way to cope in that is also I distract. I just basically leave the reality and I distract others. I distract myself. I become funny and joking, but it's not in any human interaction. And those are ways to cope with hierarchical systems that are having these relationships where somebody's getting more, somebody else has been taking advantage of. And that can even come in the name of love. A lot of parenting models are looking in a way that it looks like I care for you, I love you, but there's a lot of power involved. Why? Because we all grew up unconsciously on the same hierarchical model. It gets passed on, passed on, passed on, passed on. So it becomes ingrained, it becomes unconscious, because the level of learnings are, I'm unconsciously incompetent, I don't know what I'm supposed to know because I don't know. Then awareness rises, then I can be consciously noticing incompetency. Oh man, I could do better, but I don't know how to do it yet. That's a very uncomfortable place to be in. But if I practice, I can be consciously competent in order to lift up to a stage like, oh, wow, I know I can do better. Now I practice and I will become better, and I can prove it to myself, and it raises awareness, awakening, and consciousness. But it takes some learning levels in order to get to that place. So I think that's why I love that Virginia was pointing out those different models by raising awareness and saying, here, this is the model we live by. Is that really helpful? And here's another model that is saying the seed model is opening to a relationship that says eye level. You're the same level value than me. We're operating on eye level. Today, I may be the expert in something and you're asking me for support. Tomorrow, it may be the other way around. So our human interaction becomes an exchange of gifts, of the human needs, and we treat that with respect, we treat it with kindness, we treat it with safety, and we are meeting each other in a way where we're saying, I honor your uniqueness and I honor my own uniqueness in this, and we're creating a relationship where we are honoring that we're the same value as a person. And we differentiate between the person and the role. I may have a doctorate and you don't, but that doesn't make me anything better than you. It just means I learned something here, and I may have a job as a cleaning person. You may have a job as a medical doctor somewhere. We're still the same value as a person. We just have different education. And I think there's a lot of times confusion about somebody knows something more that makes them a better person. And to me, that's just a big time confusion. I work in the field where we have all levels of education. Mm-hmm. And I learned probably a lot more about life through people who are having a different education than me. And I'm absolutely grateful for that. And I always get big ears when I talk, especially to the people in the cleaning industry. I just love and engaging, because there's so much wisdom about life, so much wisdom about struggles and how to manage struggles in life, and how to endure that. And I just learn a lot about life through the many different people I talk with and connect. And so the proposal of that seed model in terms of a definition of a relationship is there is level. We're all the same in value. And I find that there's a lot of room today to begin to honor that, to understand that. And we will differentiate between, there's a behavior that I may have a certain judgment about, but before that behavior is an intention, and that intention is pure and coming from a good person. So we differentiate between actions and the personhood itself, because then I can have a clear judgment about, I don't like things to be done this way, I like that to be different, but that's the behavior somebody shows up with. But I tune to the beauty and the magical and miracle of the personhood of the person itself. And that's a very different way of looking at people and judging our relationship. And I think there's a lot of room for that.
Yeah, definitely. And especially in these times when we are we are faced with so many challenges and with so many different, it's not either or, it's just two complementarities or two opposites. It's many different parts of the system, of many different systems that are presenting themselves on the wider scene of life, and we have so many different perspectives. We are presented with so many different choices of getting into that same old pattern of sticking to one side against the other, or maybe creating a bigger space for everything to have a voice and an identity without having to deny the others and to make them quiet and put them to silence, so that just one universal message, quote unquote, universal to be heard. So that there is the chance, and also the great chance, and also the great risk, which are potential at the same time, depending on what we choose as individuals and then as a collective to feed, as the metaphor with the two lions that are up against each other, and one is the good one and one is the bad one, and who will win is depending on what lion you or what wolf you need to feed.
Feeding. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think a really big element that is also promoted in the Satir model work and the family systems work that she actually came up with by observation, realizing that when a symptom occurs in a patient, it is an outcome of an interplay of many important factors involved. In this particular case, a family relationship, and there are multiple players that are coming to a larger picture. So somebody is behaving a certain way. And she makes this differentiation between, in the hierarchical model, you have a cause and effect logic. So I would say, you didn't call me, that made me angry. You made me angry, your call. I mean, there's no choice in that, right? That there's a narrative that's telling me because you do that, I have to feel this way. And that's a cause and effect, old traditional, more hierarchical way of thinking. And most of us have that. I'm pretty sure I grew up that way. I'm grown in a all Catholic girls' school. There's a lot of rules, that is leading to this. So a lot of times when we think about certain rigid rules, this is the right thing to do, this is the bad thing to do, it gives a lot of orientation. I know where I am and what's good and what's bad and what's wrong. It gives safety and orientation, but it's also a very narrow-minded mindset. Most of us grew up with cause and effect ideas. It's our wedding day, you didn't bring me flowers, I'm sad, you made me sad, I feel discounted, or whatever. But maybe there may be a very different situation. In the seed model, we think of an interplay of many factors. So there's A plus B plus C plus D plus whatever, and even adding numbers to it that are coming as an ingredient of interactions, of interplays that play a role, and that is creating a certain situation. So it's not that easy. It's a lot more complex. There may be direct players, there may be indirect players, there may be observers, there or not there. There may be cameras, there may be medias that are taking things out of context and then adding other ideas to it. There may be angles, amplification. So there are multiple factors that are creating an event. And that is what the systemic idea is. And Virginia Satir came to that conclusion out of an observation. She was working with a young woman with schizophrenia, and she was getting a phone call from her mother that was threatening to sue her because the behavior of the daughter changed in the work of them. And what Virginia realized was there was a plea in her voice but the words were a threat. So she was threatening her by the words, but the pleading was in the voice tone. So there was an incongruency. There was a crossing that didn't match. And she was responding to the plea in the voice, the incongruency, and inviting the mother into the session out of an intuitive interest idea. What she noticed was that whatever the work they have done as establishing a certain type of relationship between her and the client dissipated, dropped, changed. And then she did that with inviting the husband, noticed the same pattern. Then she invited if there was another child, and she realized, yes, there was a child, there was the golden boy that was kind of worshipped by the whole family. And as she had all the players in the house, she realized that whatever behavior as a symptom the daughter showed was an interplay of important relationships. And then the whole session went into helping people stand up on their feet, meeting each other on eye level, and learning what it means to create congruent, eye level, centered, present in the here and now connection. And that was where the moving forward was for the helping the whole family system, because you have good people with good intentions that are really wanting to create a good life. But what happens is, in the disbalances, in the interplays, and in the blind spottedness, good people create horrible contextuals for people to grow up, so they're not really nurtured. And that needs sometimes education of all the weavings of all the interplays that are happening, and it needs the expansion of the picture. It's like the blind six, the six blinds that are touching parts of the elephants to describe the truth, and the one says, oh, I know what the truth is, it's the trunk of the elephant. No, I know it's the truth, it's the tail of an elephant. No, I found the truth, it's the leg of an elephant. No, I found the truth, it's that ear of the elephant. And that's how you describe the elephant itself. And then the reality is, it's all of it, it's none of it, it's more than that. And then there's even more that we can't even touch. And I found that brilliant that Virginia was pointing out, it's an interplay of so many factors, is not one cause, and that's the effect. But that way of thinking is creating hatred, problems, racism, up, down, differences, otherness, and that is a problem, not the people, but the way we think about certain sets, and that needs to be changed dramatically.
Yeah, and I really think we are in a point of paradigm shift.
Yes.
That is called for. It's not like something that is nice to have. I think that this is something that is absolutely required to have.
Yeah.
And to develop and to present and instill as the usual day-to-day way of doing things and of thinking and of acting, and that requires a lot of hard work and a lot of commitment. Yeah, and it's not an easy thing to do, but it's necessary, and I think it's high time that we do that more and more. Yeah. And this is one of the reasons we are also here to give a voice to that message, and maybe to present some of our own truths and some of our experience and models that we also share in personal or professional aspects.
Yeah.
And create that more and more of a normal way of integrating the different aspects, and not continuing on the same pattern of either or, right versus left, right versus wrong, and kind of things that just continue to keep alive a system that is dividing and not uniting.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, and I find it actually poignant that somewhat I felt that you know, we were doing the other podcast before during the Corona and shutdown time. I mean, it's obviously still continuing, but now we're starting to reopen and finding ways how to deal safely with the uncertainty that is continuing to be present with the new element, if you wish. And what I find really interesting, the fourth element of looking at hierarchical system as opposed to seed and growth model is how do you deal with change? And that implicits from you also, how comfortable are you with uncertainty? And somehow really interesting, this whole new challenge that we were facing was pushing all of us into a reality that is uncertainty. Nothing that I believe to be stable and true and accountable is still the same for me. My whole world flipped and changed, and then the creative question was, how comfortable are you in the face of change, in the face of that means there's uncertainty? And in the hierarchical model, we are not very good and we are not very interested in talking about change, where there's a resistance, there's an adversity to change. We want to hold on to the cubicles for many reasons because there's benefit. The world today, thank God, is calling us out to get comfortable with forever changing situations that are alive in the moment. Me here and now is not the same as the next second me here and now. Life is flowing all the time. We just have this weird mindset that is allowing us to stop life and put it on repeat and stay in our automatics and run on our automatics. But if we want to wake up to how life is moving forward and being part of life and being with life, I have to become comfortable with the uncertainty and being willing to continue to change. And that's what we absolutely safely invite and promote in the Satir model. Change is inevitable. Life moves all the time. And so what we want to then create is people who are growing inside of themselves, self-esteem, that sense of self-worth. I love myself in a really inside way, that I can stand on my own feet and I don't need to be needy from other people to tell me what to do, what's the right thing. But there's an inner treasure box, there's an inner voice that is informing me that I'm a miracle of life, that I'm unique, not to compare, but I can have a sense of belonging because people are similar. And on some level, they're completely the same as me, because in spirituality, we do unite, hopefully. And but there's also similarities in interests. So I can find my belonging group, but it's also true that I'm unique as unique could be, and so true for everybody else. There is no comparison. And if I really hold that in me, that I don't have to compare myself, I can just bring my inner truth, my inner voice, my inner beingness to light and to shine, then that to me is the greatest gift that we all can give to this world, to take a part into something beautiful and to something diverse and to something that is really the human representation of what nature shows us. I like to say the daisies is not complaining that it wants to be a rose, because the rose is so much more appreciated and better and more beautiful. So I hope that we learn from the daisies, from the roses, from the grasses, from the grasshoppers, from all dimensions of birds, that we are filling in the shape and form that is given to us, and treasure that and celebrate it and bring our gift to the world and not hold it back from the world, so that we are on our life itself, because we are life and we are love. And that's what I want to support.
Yeah, And in expressing our true selves, nobody needs to be affected and overshadowed by someone else's light, because we can all share our light without having to put up the shadow on somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, this is sort of a statement that we chose to do and to commit, um, and give a voice throughout our conversations.
Yeah.
That sharing of speaking that truth that is authentic, and it's at the same time unique, and at the same time the same with the bigger truth and the truth of other people, is sort of a challenge for us both, and I think for us as a collective even nowadays.
Yeah. Very.
But as every drop gets to the ocean in the end, I think that we can follow the river to the ocean, and share this experience, and let it unfold, and commit to bringing more and more awareness for making conscious choices for now and for the future.
Yeah, I love the drop of the ocean that you are. And I love the light that you bring. So thank you for bringing so much light to my life.
Thank you for being present and sharing this experience. And I truly believe that life happens in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how life is vibrating.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how we get to experience life at its best.
Yeah. Thank you, soul sister.